So this just happened 20 minutes ago. I am an exterminator, and one of the crappy things about this job is where to go to the bathroom. We are instructed not to ask customers, no matter the urgency, to use their bathrooms. So that leaves the techs to find bathrooms in their area that we can use. Parks, porta potties, stores, or one unfortunate time a bucket in the back of my truck. So today started normally. I had a few stops in my normal area and I felt the urge. Thinking quickly, I remembered a park a few miles from where I was that had an outhouse building, like a snack shack at a little kid's baseball games and whatnot, but the bathrooms are around back. So I go to the park, and of course, most sports are over for the season and the bathrooms are locked. Damn. I call a coworker and ask if he's familiar with the area that I'm in to help me find another restroom. He told me about the park that no one really goes to anymore, kind of abandoned because it was built next to a creek that overflows all the time, and the bathrooms are gross, but they're usually open year-round. Awesome. I didn't care about cleanliness, I just needed to go. I popped the roughly estimated address into my GPS and head that way. Apparently, I have driven by this place 100 times over and never noticed it. I pull in, there aren't any other cars there, so I make my way to the outhouse building. I grab my phone and make my way in. My coworker was right. It looks like they haven't been cleaned in a few years, and there's graffiti and mildew all over the walls inside. But I need to go. I head into the cleanest stall that I can find, still very nasty, and proceed to mound up toilet paper all over the seat to make a cover. So I'm sitting there doing my business, reading no sleep as usual, and I hear the exterior door open. I should probably mention that the park had gravel in the parking lot and driveway, and it was overgrown a bit and covered with fallen sticks, so I would have definitely heard if a vehicle pulled in. So I hear the door open and I kind of make a clearing my throat noise, letting someone know that I was in there, and the door closes. I don't hear anything for a moment, so I go back to reading, thinking that someone came in, saw how gross it was, and didn't have to go as bad as I did, and left. After about a minute, I hear footsteps. Creepy, but I try to ignore it. I was in the last stall farthest from the door in a line of 3 stalls. The footsteps grew closer. Still trying to keep calm, I figured that the dude had to go like me, so I don't care. Then the footsteps sped up quickly and ran and stopped directly in front of the stall that I was in, and turned towards the door. All I could see were ratty-looking tennis sneakers. There was a push against the door, and I said, "Occupied." They stood there. Then there was more forceful pushing against the door. "I'm sorry, this one's occupied." They still stood there in silence. Then the door started violently shaking, and the person was bent out of hell on getting in. I yelled out a final time, "Occupied!" and it stopped. The person slowly turned and walked to the door, and before shutting it, laughed and turned out the already dim flickering lights. I finished up and ran out, looking all around, and found no one. I checked my work truck, which was all locked up, and found nothing was wrong. I don't know who or what the hell was there, but it definitely creeped me the heck out. Back in 1949, I was a 20-year-old guy working as a cashier at a grocery store. On the way to work, my car got a flat, so I took it to the tire shop about a mile down the road and walked to work. After work, I was walking down the rural highway to get my car when a dark blue van pulls up. Yeah, I know. Stereotypical van. Anyway, the guy hollers out his window asking if I wanted a ride. The shop was still 3/4 of a mile away, so I'm thinking, yeah. I cross the runoff trench and look through the passenger window to explain where I'm going. As I'm about to open the door and climb in, I look down and see a stack of gay bondage magazines. I'm pretty open-minded, but it struck me as odd, and I decided I would rather walk. Better safe than sorry. At this point, I tell him no thanks, but he keeps insisting that I get into the van. Over and over, he insists it's dangerous to walk on the highway and that I should let him give me a ride. After telling him no several times, I just walked away and jumped back on the other side of the runoff trench. For nearly a block he followed me, driving slowly on the shoulder. He kept looking over his shoulder at traffic, and I got the feeling he was waiting for the highway to be clear so that he could abduct me, or worse. I was moments away from running into the woods, which in hindsight probably would have been a horrible idea, when a state trooper drove by and I flagged him down. The guy in the van drove away as soon as he saw the trooper. The trooper gave me a ride to the tire shop while I gave him a description of the guy in the van. Just the idea that I almost got into the van to save myself a short walk still disturbs me to this day. I am originally from India. My parents sent me and my sisters to an Indian camp so that way we could learn more about our culture. At this time, I was around 14 years old. I was the standard young and cute kid. I had been going to this camp for a couple of summers, and this particular summer was an important one. The teachers were extremely excited because they had a yoga guru of some sort visiting. I think he was around 60 years old at the time. He would teach us traditional music and dance. He started noticing me right away and kept making comments about how well I was doing. As the summer continued, I would frequently find him watching me and talking to the teachers about me. Whenever he fixed my pose, he would linger a little too long. These things kept happening, and I started to become hyper-aware of his presence. Flash to the end of the camp. It was a couple of days before ending ceremony. A few girls ran up to me and said that he had candy in his room. He was staying at the camp. They said that he would give me some if I went up. I really liked sugar. I didn't feel comfortable going alone, so I had some of the girls go with me. He gave them candy right away and they left. When I asked for some, he motioned for me to come inside his room. I shook my head. He kept trying to get me to go inside his room. Finally, he gave up after I wouldn't budge and asked for a kiss in exchange for candy. Something inside me said, "Run." I started backing away and booked it. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I just knew that something in that situation wasn't right. I think I told my parents because we never went back to that camp again. So, creepy pedo, let's not meet again. So I've been a bus driver for over 11 years now, and I've got some stories to tell. Believe it or not, my 65-year-old mother is a Reddit junkie and recommended that I share some of my stories on this site. I'll start with probably my most frightening story of them all. I'll start off by saying I don't scare easy. I'm a veteran. I served the U.S. Navy for 10 years. I'm a male and I'm 39 years old. I drive a bus in a very large city. Usually my route takes me to a pretty decent area of the city. However, about 7 years ago, one of the drivers had a massive heart attack and was out, so we were all taking turns working his shift. His route was in a not so nice part of town. In fact, I started thinking about stashing my gun underneath my seat while working his route. So it's winter and it's particularly cold day. It's been pretty slow with the weather being as it is, and I only had an old woman who was doing Sudoku and a young man who told me that he had just finished a 10-hour shift. We're going along, preparing to drive by the next stop as I did, not seeing anyone at the stop, when all of a sudden I see a woman practically jump in front of the bus at the upcoming stop and I slam on my brakes. I'm shaken up and both of my passengers are muttering how she just appeared out of thin air. So I open the door and she steps onto the bus. She doesn't look more than 18 years old, maybe younger. Dark, greasy, matted hair. She's wearing layers of dirty clothes, fingerless gloves, scarves, etc. I asked her to swipe her bus pass and she just stands there blinking at me. "Ma'am, your bus pass?" I ask again. "Daryl dropped me here. He said he didn't have time for me or the baby," she's muttering as she's staring past me. I decide ain't nobody got time for this. I figure I'll let her stay on the bus for a while to warm up and then I'll kick her out in a few blocks. So I take off and tell her to go take her seat. "Wanna see my baby?" she asks, just standing next to my seat. I can totally smell her now and I'm trying not to vomit because she stunk. Uh, no, you need to sit down, I said firmly. Go sit. More staring into space, mumbling about Daryl and babies. Finally, she shuffles to the seat across from the gentleman. He's listening to his music, oblivious, and I hear her ask him if he wants to see her baby. The woman, who's probably in her early 70s, puts down her Sudoku and says that she'd love to see Crazy Woman's baby. I shake my head and focus on the road. That's when the Korean woman lets out a scream. I look in the mirror and Crazy is holding out something in her hand. Now the guy pulls out his earbuds and I see him recoil in terror. We aren't really supposed to stop anywhere but bus stops, but I needed Crazy off this bus now and God knows what she has in her hand. So I pull over into an empty lot and go back and escort her off the bus. That's when she turns and I see what's in her hands. I ended up radioing dispatch to call for police and an ambulance. I won't go into much detail, but suffice to say that she had been pregnant and she delivered way too early and the baby had been delivered stillborn. He was still attached to her placenta, which she hadn't delivered yet. Suffice to say, she was taken to the hospital. I'd like to think that maybe she got some help, but knowing the city and how they treat the mentally ill, I doubt it. That's probably the most disturbing thing that's happened to me on the bus, but I have way more stories that I plan to share here. So crazy lady, let's not meet again.